I woke up before I was supposed to. That's the only way I can explain it. The anesthesiologist told me afterward that my body metabolized the sedative faster than expected, something about my liver enzymes, something about my age. I was 63 years old, and apparently my body had decided, on its own, that it wasn't going to stay under. I didn't open my eyes. I don't know why I didn't open my eyes. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the 35 years I'd spent in commercial litigation, reading rooms before I walked into them. Whatever it was, something told me to stay still, keep my breathing slow, and listen. The recovery room was quiet except for the soft beeping of a monitor somewhere to my left and the shuffle of soft-soled shoes on linoleum. I could feel the thin blanket over my legs. I could feel the IV line in my left arm. I could feel that my right knee, the one they had just gone into to repair a torn meniscus, was wrapped tight and elevated. I had been on the table for less than 90 minutes. Routine outpatient procedure. My wife had dropped me off at 7 that morning, kissed me on the cheek in the pre-op bay, and said she'd be in the waiting room when I came out. That was the last normal moment of my life. Is the wife still out there? A woman's voice. Low, professional, not unkind. One of the nurses, I thought. Someone who had been in that room during the procedure. A pause. Footsteps crossing the floor. She is. A different voice. Younger. She's been on her phone the whole time. Dr. Calloway wants this given to her directly. A rustling sound. Paper, or maybe an envelope. He said don't process it through the front desk. Hand it to her personally. Don't mention it to the patient. Silence. Don't mention it to. I know what he said. The younger voice again. Quieter now. I just don't understand why she'd need. It's not our job to understand. The older voice was firm, but not cruel. Give it to her before he comes out. That's all. More footsteps. A door opened and closed. I lay there with my eyes shut and my hands perfectly still at my sides, and I thought about my wife of 29 years, sitting 40 feet away in a waiting room, about to receive something from my surgeon that I was not supposed to know about. My name is Robert. I was born in Dayton, Ohio, raised in Cincinnati, and I have lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for the last 31 years. I have 2 children, a son named Daniel, who is 31 and lives in Denver, and a daughter named Melissa, who is 28 and teaches elementary school 20 minutes from our house. I built a legal career from nothing. I made partner at 41. I retired at 61 because my wife, whose name is Sandra, told me she wanted us to travel while we were still young enough to enjoy it. I sold my share of the firm. I took the buyout. I said yes to all of it. Sandra was 58 when I retired. She was still beautiful, in the way that some women become more beautiful as they age, composed, certain of herself, with gray threading through her dark hair that she refused to color because she said she'd earned every one of them. We had been happy, or I had believed we had been happy, which I was beginning to understand was not the same thing. The knee surgery had been her idea. That's the part I keep coming back to. My meniscus had been bothering me for 2 years, on and off, manageable with anti-inflammatories and rest. It was Sandra who found Dr. Calloway. She had read about him online, she said. Best orthopedic surgeon in the region. She made the consultation appointment herself and drove me to it. She sat in the examination room while he explained the procedure, nodding at the right moments, asking thoughtful questions about recovery time. I had thought she was being caring. I had thought a lot of things. When the nurse came back into the recovery room, I could tell by the lighter footstep, the faint scent of hand sanitizer, I kept my breathing measured. Even a sleeping man's breathing. He's still under, she said to someone. Or to no one. I heard the scratch of a pen on a clipboard. I waited until I heard her step away, and then I opened my eyes just enough to see the ceiling and the edge of the privacy curtain, and, beyond it, the gray-blue light coming through a slatted window blind. I closed my eyes again, and I thought about Dr. Calloway. I had liked him, which made it worse. He was in his early 50s, silver-haired, with the particular confidence of a man who worked with his hands and trusted them. He had a firm handshake and explained things in plain language. He had looked me in the eye during every appointment. I had trusted him the way you trust a mechanic who's been honest with you for years, not blindly, but with the accumulated weight of evidence. I thought about the way he had spoken to Sandra in the consultation room. Professional, thorough. He had asked her if she had questions as often as he asked me. At the time, I had found that considerate. A surgeon who didn't speak over the spouse. Now I was cataloging every interaction from the beginning and finding things I had smoothed over without noticing. The follow-up appointment he had suggested scheduling sooner rather than later. The way Sandra had said his name Calloway without the doctor in front of it. Just once, in the car on the way home, before correcting herself. The phone call she had taken in the bathroom 2 weeks before the surgery, the one that had lasted 40 minutes, the one she said was her college roommate in Portland. I was a litigator for 35 years. I know what it looks like when someone is building a case. I had simply never considered that someone might be building one against me. They moved me to a regular recovery bay an hour later. Sandra was there when they wheeled me in, standing at the foot of the bed with a coffee cup in her hand and a look of practiced relief on her face. "There he is," she said. I smiled at her. I had been smiling at Sandra for 29 years. I knew how to do it without thinking. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Groggy," I said, which was true, knees tight. "That's normal." She sat down in the chair beside the bed and put her hand over mine. Dr. Calloway said it went perfectly. I looked at her hand on mine. I thought about the envelope. "Did you talk to him?" I asked. "Briefly." She smiled. "He came out to update me after. Said you did great." I nodded. I closed my eyes. I let her think I was drifting back towards sleep. I was not drifting. I was thinking. We had a joint financial account that I had not checked in 4 months. I had retired and handed Sandra the household accounting the way I had handed her everything domestic over the years without looking too closely, because I had trusted her, and because I had been busy, and because some part of me had believed that the structures of a long marriage hold themselves up without constant inspection. That belief, I was beginning to understand, had cost me. I did not confront Sandra that day, or that week. I had not spent 3.5 decades in courtrooms by leading with my emotions. I went home. I recovered. I did my physical therapy, and I thanked my wife for bringing me soup, and I watched her move through our house, and I thought about what I knew and what I didn't know and what I needed to find out. I started with the finances. Our investment accounts were held jointly at a brokerage I had used since my early 40s. The access credentials were saved on the home desktop that Sandra used more than I did. I logged in from my laptop, in my home office, on a Thursday afternoon while she was at her book club. In the 14 months since my retirement, $430,000 had been moved from our joint investment account to a savings account I did not recognize. The transfers were small enough individually, $8,000 here, $12,000 there, that they would not have triggered automatic alerts. But the pattern was unmistakable, regular, deliberate. The transfers had started 11 months ago. I sat with that number for a long time. Then I pulled up the property records for Mecklenburg County. There is a house on Westfield Lane in the south end of Charlotte that I had never seen before. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, purchased 14 months ago for $380,000. The buyer of record was a limited liability company called Sandridge Holdings, LLC. Sandra's maiden name was Ridge. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark for a while. Then I called my former law partner. His name is Gerald. We had practiced together for 19 years. He is 67, retired like me, and he has more discretion in his little finger than most lawyers acquire in a career. I told him what I had found. I told him about the envelope. I told him about Dr. Calloway. I told him about Sandridge Holdings. Gerald was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Bobby, who do you want handling this?" I told him I wanted the best family law attorney in Mecklenburg County, someone Sandra wouldn't know, and I wanted them retained before the end of the week. I also told him I needed a private investigator. Her name was Louise. She came recommended through Gerald's network, and she had the particular quality I value most in a professional. She gave me information without editorializing. She left the feelings to me. What Louise found, over the following 6 weeks, was this. Dr. Marcus Calloway and my wife had met 7 years ago at a charity gala for the Carolinas Medical Center Foundation. I had been invited to that gala and had declined because I had a brief due the following Monday. Sandra had gone alone. I remembered her coming home that night in a blue dress, telling me it had been lovely, kissing me goodnight. Their relationship, according to Louise's documentation, had been ongoing since approximately that time. 7 years. Through my mother's funeral. Through Daniel's wedding. Through the retirement party Sandra had thrown for me at our country club where she had stood beside me and toasted our next chapter together. 7 years. The house on Westfield Lane was where Calloway stayed when he wasn't at his own residence. Louise had photographs. The LLC had been Sandra's idea. She had used an attorney in Gastonia, 40 minutes away, someone with no connection to our social circle. The money transfers corresponded almost exactly to the carrying costs of the property. Mortgage, utilities, furnishings. She had been funding a second household with our retirement savings. The envelope, Louise eventually confirmed through a source at the surgical center, had contained a spare key to the Westfield Lane house and a handwritten note. The note said, "It's done. Come home." The surgery had been scheduled for the day I was supposed to be incapacitated. Sandra had planned to leave a note at the house for herself, a private signal, a small celebration. She had not planned on my body metabolizing anesthesia faster than expected. She had not planned on me at all. My attorney's name is Patricia. She is 54 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, and she has the courtroom presence of someone twice her size. Gerald had used her in 2 previous matters and described her as precise and remorseless, which were exactly the qualities I needed. Patricia advised me to say nothing until we had gathered everything, so I said nothing. I came downstairs every morning and I had coffee with Sandra and I read the newspaper and I asked her about her plans for the day. I learned in those weeks that I had underestimated what a long marriage could hold. You can share a bed with someone and move through the rooms of your life alongside them and have no idea what they are carrying. I had loved Sandra. I believe she had, at some point, loved me. What we had become to each other in the last 7 years was something I was still working out. I did not hate her. I want to be clear about that. What I felt was colder than hate and more useful. Patricia filed in the 2nd week of October. Sandra was served on a Tuesday morning. I was in the kitchen when she walked in holding the papers, and I watched her face go through 3 or 4 expressions before it settled into something careful and still. "Robert," she said. "I know about the house," I said. "I know about the LLC. I know about the transfers. I know about Marcus." I paused. "I've known since July." She sat down. She set the papers on the table between us. She looked at me for a long time and I looked back. "How?" she asked. "I woke up," I said. The discovery process was not pleasant for Sandra or for Dr. Calloway. Patricia was thorough. The financial forensics established that Sandra had transferred a total of $462,000 from our joint accounts over the course of the scheme. The property on Westfield Lane had been purchased using a combination of those funds and a loan that Calloway had co-signed under the LLC. Under North Carolina law, the dissipation of marital assets is taken seriously by the courts. What Sandra had done, systematically diverting retirement savings to fund a separate life, was exactly the kind of conduct that judges in equitable distribution cases tend to view unfavorably. Calloway had his own problems. A complaint was filed with the North Carolina Medical Board regarding the communication of private patient information to a third party, specifically his use of a nurse to pass a personal message to my wife during my procedure without my knowledge or consent. I had not planned to pursue that avenue until Patricia pointed out that what he had done likely constituted a violation of patient privacy regulations. The board opened an investigation. His hospital privileges were reviewed. I did not seek that outcome to be vindictive. I sought it because it was accurate, and because accuracy matters. The divorce was finalized the following spring. Sandra received 30% of our remaining joint assets, reduced from the standard equitable share due to the documented dissipation. The house on Westfield Lane was sold. The proceeds were applied as restitution. The Gastonia attorney who had set up Sandridge Holdings was referred to the state bar for a conduct review. Daniel called me the night the divorce was finalized. He was careful, the way children of long marriages learn to be careful, not wanting to say the wrong thing. He asked me how I was. I told him I was all right. I told him I was more all right than I had expected to be. Melissa drove up from her place the following weekend and we sat on the back porch and she cried a little and I let her, and then she asked me what I was going to do now. I told her I was thinking about traveling. On my own terms this time. I had always wanted to see Portugal. I had a former colleague in Lisbon who had been inviting me for years. She laughed a little through the tears and said that sounded like me. It did sound like me. It sounded like the version of me I was going to spend the next part of my life getting reacquainted with, the one who woke up when he wasn't supposed to and kept his eyes closed and listened, and then went home and did the work, and did not let grief make him careless. There is a detail I have not mentioned until now, because I wanted you to understand everything else first. On the morning Sandra was served, before she walked into the kitchen with those papers, I had been sitting at the table with my coffee and the early light coming through the window over the sink, the window that faces the backyard, the one we had argued pleasantly about for years because Sandra wanted to plant roses along that fence, and I kept forgetting to dig the beds. The roses had been planted 2 summers ago. They were still there. They would probably outlast everything. I thought about that for a moment. Then I finished my coffee, rinsed the cup, and waited for my wife to come downstairs. I had waited long enough. I had done it right. And when the door opened and I heard her footsteps in the hallway, I was steady and clear-eyed and completely, finally, ready. That is what it feels like when the truth catches up. Not like an explosion, not like the end of something. It feels like a door opening onto a room you forgot was there, full of light, full of air, and entirely your own.